Hi, this is an overview of how to use the World Volcanoes web app that I've created here. You can see it's quite a detailed map, and so it might be worth explaining all the different functions of it. The explanations of what to do and what to look at are all provided here in the map journal template. If you want to open the map directly, you can click on this direct link section and get it as a full screen. And if you click on the eye here, you get information about the instructions that were on the other slide as well, so you can use either version. Let's look at the full screen version of this. Information that's in this map, if I click on this, which is called layer list, I get all the layers that are in here. If I click them off, you can see more clearly what they are one by one. I've got the plate boundaries and the different directions they're moving in. If I click on it, I get a key that I can see there. I can get rid of them. I've got world volcanoes. These are all the major volcanoes around the world. I can click on any of them and get a little bit of information about them, such as their name and location and type of volcano. Again, it's got certain types when I click on them to see the legend, the key. Now, what we can't tell, if I just go back to the volcanoes themselves, is how active they are, how many times they've erupted. So I've produced this layer called a heat map that displays the areas where I've had the most frequent eruptions. There might be lots of volcanoes in one area, but they may be dormant or have not erupted very often, whereas this heat map actually shows the concentrations of eruptions over the last 2,000 years. So I can look around the world and see where they're most frequent using that. And finally, the other thing I can't tell from the volcanoes is firstly if they've exploded, but I can do that with a heat map frequency, but also how powerful those explosions have been. So this one, VEI, Volcanic Explosivity Index, has proportional circles for every eruption in the last 2,000 years by the power of the eruption from a scale from 1 to 7 or 8. You can see here greater than 7, and you can click on these again and get details about the volcano and the date of eruption and the power of eruption. So this one is a VEI of 2, the one I particularly picked at the moment, for example. And I'm scrolling through a few different ones. I'm hovering over here. Okay, so those are the different layers in the map. Let's get rid of that one. And let's turn on the world volcanoes and tectonic plate boundaries to start with. So let's zoom to a particular part of the world. I can see there's quite a few around here in Indonesia. You can see the plate boundary here in the red line, and it tells me from the legend that this is a destructive plate boundary, or otherwise known as convergent one, which means they're coming together, those plates. Okay, so I can see there's a series of volcanoes which have occurred across here, and remember I've got the heat map as well if I wanted to see where the most frequent eruptions are. I can see there's a concentration, for example, of frequent eruptions around here in this region. Okay, so if I go to this button, the summary button is quite useful because for any view that I'm looking at, it will produce for me an instant summary of the number of eruptions that have occurred in that particular view. So 2,700 or so, I've just moved it so it's changing. I can zoom in and it keeps updating. So you can see in this area there's quite a lot of eruptions. Just zoomed into this island of Java, and I can see there's about 1,600 eruptions in the last 2,000 years from these different volcanoes. They're not 1,500 volcanoes, but there have been 1,500 eruptions. I can see the average eruption power was 1.7, but there was some of very powerful ones, a maximum 107 somewhere tucked away in here. So the summary button is quite useful to compare different parts of the world and see how they differ in terms of number of eruptions and the power of eruptions that they experience. Other things you can do is also graph the data. So let's say we're looking at this view of Java in Indonesia, then I can chart the eruptions by the power of their volcanic explosivity index. I can use a spatial filter to limit the features so I don't look at the whole world, and so I'm only going to look at either the features in this map. If I apply that, then it will produce a chart for me, or I can actually draw around a particular area, so I'll just show you that using a drawing tool. Let's say I'm only interested in this area, I can draw around it and then apply it there. So now I'm just focusing on the volcanoes in this particular area. You can see they're highlighted by little mountain symbols, which means that they've been picked for this graph, and I can see that there was mostly eruption levels, volcanic explosivity index levels of 2 here, and it highlights all the ones that have exploded at that level. There's 118 of them, but there are also some at level of 3 and a few that are larger, and as you can see they get highlighted by a yellow box whenever I hover over them, so I can begin to see where they're more powerful ones are. There's even one that exploded at level 5 explosion here. There's also, ignore this is ones which we don't have data for the size of the explosion, but we know they have exploded in the last 2,000 years. So so that's how the graphing tool works, and there's a few other graphs that show the same data. You can look at it as a pie chart to see the proportions of explosions, or as a horizontal bar chart. So that's the charting tool, and again, comparing different parts of the world, you can take some time looking at areas that have had bigger or smaller eruptions and how they vary, and if it's quite a similar pattern in the world, that most areas have explosions around too, or whether some areas vary, having more powerful ones. So that's the charting tool. The measurement tool is also quite useful because you can see that these volcanoes are situated a little distance from the plate boundary, so we can find out how far they are using the measurement tool. You've got a ruler here. You can click on anywhere in the map, and we're going to click here. We can see between this sort of zone of volcanoes and the plate boundary seems to be about 160 miles, or in kilometres, 260 odd kilometres. And I can see that's quite similar across this zone. And again, this is something I can do to compare different parts of the world and see if there's a common pattern with the distance that volcanoes seem to occur from a plate boundary, and if different plate boundaries have different relationships to the distances that their volcanoes tend to occur on. But I can clearly see there's a link. They're not on the boundary, but they're near it, and again, try to explain how and why that is. The other thing you'll notice, they're all on one side of the plate boundary again, so again, use your tectonic understanding or knowledge or investigation to try and find out why that is. So that's the measurement tool. We talked about the legend chart tool, measurement tool, the summary tool, and the information button here telling you about it, and the layer list. The other one you can play with is the query tool as well. If you wish, you can look for just, let's say, the most powerful eruptions in the world. So let's say I only want to see volcanic explosivity index eruptions that are greater than 5, let's say. I could limit it to certain areas, as I've shown you before, drawn areas, or I could just apply it to the whole world. So if I do it for the whole world here, it'll zoom out and it'll put a little mountain symbol here, showing me all the volcanoes that it's found that have greater eruption than 5. You can see this one, Pinatubo in 1991. Pinatubo in Philippines had an eruption level of 6 here, quite a recent and very powerful one. So they're all listed here, and I can zoom to any of them to find out more information about them and so on, and see where they are. So that's quite nice to be able to query tool, and you can keep changing these queries for different levels, see just ones that are 6 and greater and so on, for the whole world or just for one particular region you want to explore. So greater than 6 are only a small handful that it's found that are greater than 6 here in the world, so a much smaller number. Okay, so in fact, if I understand this right, it's only found 3 different volcanoes, but oh, there we are. Yes, 1, 2, 3, that are greater than 6, 7. So these are the really big ones, like Tambora here. So this is a way of exploring different volcanoes in the world, and how they vary, and their relationship to plate boundaries, and understanding things like measurement tools to understand the distance between volcanoes and plate boundaries. And as I said, the other thing that you can explore apart from using the charting tools is the volcanic explosivity index. So as you zoom in, those circles become a bit clearer. We can see here there's Tambora, and we can see here it's erupted a few times, at least twice in the last 2,000 years on these circles. It shows each eruption, and one of them very powerful here. We can see that's the VI7 eruption here that happened in 1812, I believe. So there you go. That's some of the information and the way you can analyse it. There's loads of stuff to play around with on this map, loads of things you can use to explore and understand volcanic eruptions and their not just volcano locations, but also their frequency and distribution around the world, which areas get the most. You can also see which areas get the most powerful ones as well, so quite a few different ways you can look at the data. And finally, there are things here you can change to the base map, you can print map views out, you can even draw on the map and annotate it with information you found and then print it out. So there's lots of other things you can play with to visualize the map and to explain it. So there you go, that's an overview. The instructions for this are all here on the story map journal, and hopefully you have a good time exploring and investigating this map and understanding a little bit more about volcanoes around the world and how they work. My name is Raphael Heath, I'm the Head of Geography at the Royal High School Bath, and thanks for having a look at this map.